at least we should answer to some of the questions raised in the. So in the YouTube, there was a student who asked questions to Professor Rongfu. So I actually copied and pasted the questions in the chat. Have you had time to check it? Okay, so the question briefly was basically it was two questions. The first one is, I know how the care is very much outsourced in some countries and possibly Japan as well. I wonder if you can account for anything you know regarding the outsourced long-term care. What happens when a caregiver is a foreigner in Japan? Does the same process still apply for those insured? Second one is, what are the options for the elderly choose to be cared outside of home, willing to choose or shop for the care institutions outside of their home? Professor, can you like briefly answer to these questions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for very good questions for clarifications. For the first question, well, a foreigner as a caregiver, I'm not sure whether you're talking about the formal caregivers as immigrant foreigners, but if that's the case, I'm a little bit lost about the second one, because does the same process still apply for those insured? I think if you're talking about formal caregivers who are coming from other countries, it's basically treated the same as the formal caregivers, domestic formal caregivers, because the long-term care insurance is basically covering all those costs, regardless of the nationality of the formal caregivers. But I would say that to get a license or certificate to be a formal care worker in Japan is super difficult because all the tests are in Japanese. So once you really want to work in Japan as a foreigner, the first step is not learning those techniques to taking care of someone, but the language. So I would say it's very challenging for the formal care workers as foreigners in Japan, but basically the steps are exactly the same for the domestic workers. But as a foreigner, if you're talking about foreigner as a consumer of the long-term care services, I would say it's exactly also the same, as long as you're insured into the long-term care insurance systems. So it's not discriminating based on your nationality at all. The second question is about outsourcing the care duties to not at home, but institutions, right? There are basically two types of nursing homes in Japan. Private or public, but it's a super long waiting list for public nursing homes in Japan. Only those who with like means test, not really means test, but their incomes are relatively lower than the average, and really no one can afford for your private nursing home expenses. You will be allocated in a waiting list for public nursing homes, but usually you have to wait at least a year until you can really enroll into any nursing homes in Japan if it's public. If it's private, a lot of vacancy. You can free to choose any nursing homes you want to be in. And I think the equipment or all the environments are very, very nice. Staff there are very nice, very kind, taking care of you 24 hours, but it's very expensive. As far as I know, I learned from one of my colleagues, her mother is staying in a private nursing home, and monthly cost is over 20万yen, so 200,000 Japanese yen per month. It's still like reaching almost average income for Japanese population. So basically, older people are using all of their pensions or even savings if they want to stay in private nursing homes. Not sure whether it's informative, but that's my response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Yes, to my understanding, the so-called the kaigo problem in Japan is a very important social issue, and I heard that you need a lot of like foreign care workers to because there basically is a shortage of care workers in Japan because there are so many old people. So, to take care of all of them, you have to rely on foreign caregivers. But as you said, they have to take Japanese exams, and training those foreign immigrants, it costs a lot of money, so it's not an easy process. So I understand it is a very complicated process. So for other professors, there were no questions from YouTube, but I cannot just let you go. So I'm just very quick just clarifying questions for the two presenters. For Professor Alice Chung, your question was basically it's based on very rigorous analysis of survey data. And I was just wondering, so your main finding was that, husbands in the share of housework, that effect on fertility intention is most kind of significant and prominent among the women with tertiary education. Do you know any other kind of similar findings or studies based on other societies? Because that would be a very, very important kind of thing. And also, on the other hand, do you think that kind of significant effect among tertiary educated women, do you think that effect would be even more stronger, like higher or stronger even among women with tertiary education with employment, compared to, women with tertiary education without employment? So yeah, that is my question.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Im, for your question. Like I mentioned earlier, these similar patterns were reported in both Finland and Italy. And of course, Finland is probably a bit less relevant for East Asia, but the fact that Italy found similar things that would sort of make me expect that if there were similar kind of data available in Japan and let's say Korea, maybe we'll find the same things. Because normally family demographers in particular think that Southern European countries are quite similar to East Asian countries in terms of their collectivist culture, and the fact that the marriage of two persons is not really about two people. It's not really just these two individuals. It's a marriage of two families. So the parental values and expectations really have some non-neglectable impact on their adult children's decisions. So yes, similar findings were found. Well, in terms of the fact that husbands' tax sharing is particularly important in childcare, and that's what the childcare sharing of increases fertility intentions of women. Women's this kind of finding is found in Finland and Italy. But in terms of these educational variations in how the association between husband's health and fertility intention, I don't think I've seen similar findings in other countries. Like I said, this is one of the limitations in existing research. Basically, most researchers somehow just ignore this education effect and really not thinking about its moderating influence on the association. And the second question, whether this finding will vary for tertiary educated mothers with employment versus those without employment. To be honest, I didn't test this in my study, and I would expect that the effect would be probably stronger for those who are employed, because their time pressure and then the conflict between work and family is stronger. So I would expect that their husband's help matters more than those stay-at-home, better, well-educated mothers. That's my answer.
Okay, thank you, Professor. And I have a quick question or comment to the last presentation, Professor Choi. So yeah, the Chinese case is very interesting. And just one thought that came to my mind was that probably the reason, the government is using this, in some sense, kind of old style, old school kind of nationalist kind of language in promoting fertility is partly due to maybe budget constraint, because to provide child care services and promoting parental leaves and so forth and so forth. So all kinds of welfare policies, child care policies need a lot of money basically. But to my understanding, Chinese welfare state has been expanding continuously, but I don't know, it is still not there yet to meet all the needs, the needs of mothers and families. So in order to make up for that, they are relying on these kind of old ideology or paradigms, or family paradigms, or nationalist languages in order to make up for the lack of budget. So I think in some sense it is their kind of strategic, I don't know, choice. What do you think?
I think this is really interesting. And I think it will not just really about China, it will also about a lot of middle income countries, because we have seen, for example, middle income countries like Russia or Turkey or countries like Iran, and they all resort to using nationalist rhetorics to push or to give women pressure to have more children. And one of the reasons maybe is really budgetary constraints, but I also think it's really about the political culture as well. These countries, for example, China has been quite nationalistic, and even after the economic reform, and in particular in the last 10 years, the so-called China dream and all this is really a very nationalistic discourse. So it could be about budgetary constraints, but it also could be echoing, the overall political culture. But I think my concern, or our concern as feminist scholars, is really about the marginalization of gender equality or individual human rights discourses in the national discourses. Because I think, as I know I presented, we are quite concerned about how this three-child policy will limit or restrict women's reproductive autonomy. Also, given that China has a history of coercive enforcement of population policies, and also given its political structure is we will be quite concerned about this.
Okay, thank you. So it's way over our expected time. So I'm gonna wrap up today. Is there any burning questions among the presenters that you want to ask to other presenters? Okay, if not, then yeah, it's time to wrap up today's symposium. So I thank you all the three wonderful today's presenters and all the audience on YouTube. So our Seoul National University Population Research Center has been holding this kind of symposium annually for 3 consecutive years so far, and we will do so in the for the at least next few years. So if you are interested in, we usually hold this kind of event in November or usually in December. So please, if you receive an email from us, please open and read. It's not a spam, so yeah, and check out the email. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope to see you all in person, whether in, I don't know, Korea, China, Taiwan, or wherever in the world. Okay, have a nice rest of the day, and I hope to see you all in the future. Bye-bye.